that don't know me, which is basically this side of the room, my name is Josh Ellis from the Metropolitan Planning Council. This is the January meeting, the first of 2015 of a group called the Calumet Stormwater Collaborative. Just for a little bit of background, I'm happy to explain more. We have been meeting since April of last year, a range of governmental and non-governmental and private sector partners looking at a whole host of stormwater management issues in the greater Calumet area, which is, for our general purposes, 87th Street in the city of Chicago, south all the way through the south suburbs to the Indiana border, and then to the west. It's, roughly speaking, the sewer shed of the Calumet wastewater treatment plant, where this whole area drains to. It's also the watershed of the CalSag channel. So now we're going to go around and do introductions, and you'll hear everybody that's in the room, and then we're joined today by a big contingent from Midlothian, which is great. So Eric, why don't you start with you? And if you, as you say your name, if you realize that you haven't checked off your name on the sign-in sheet, make sure you do that today, because as you know, there are awards for perfect attendance. Eric.
Good morning, Eric Otto from the Forest Preserves of Cook County.
John Watson, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District.
Valerie from Midlothian.
Perfect. Yeah, go.
Dennis Lato, South Suburban Mayors and Managers.
Ellen Lekovich, I started Floodlothian Midlothian. Mary Chiz, Floodlothian Midlothian. Kara Price, I'm on the village board for Midlothian.
Stephen Reed, Floodlothian, Midlothian.
Chris Parker, Floodlothian.
J.P. Hill, Floodlothian.
Mason Throberg, CH2M Hill Engineers.
Nora Beck, Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning.
Jody Pratt with City of Blue Island.
Maddie Meehan, Friends of the Chicago River.
Michael Berkshire with the Chicago Department of Planning and Development.
Matt Harrison with Delta Institute.
Curtis Woodick, University of Illinois at Chicago.
Eric Nagy, Weaver Booth Consultants.
Aaron Maloney, Army Corps of Engineers.
Thomas Burke with Mr. Burke Engineering.
Emad Samara with the U.S. Army Corps.
Tom Price, Conservation Design Forum.
Mary Pat Matson, University of Illinois.
Jerry Gillis, trustee for Village Midlothian.
Joe Sperry, Public Works Superintendent, Midlothian.
Ruben Pacina, Floodlothian Midlothian.
Dan Wolf, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Danielle Galley, Program Manager at Metropolitan Planning Council.
John M. Jackson with CHE Water.
Chris Mulvaney, Chicago Rivers.
Brent Schroeder,
MWOD.
Andrew Schwab,
Lyndon Valcenti, Foresight Design Initiative. Kelsey Arbach, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Edith Mack from Metropolitan Mayor's Conference.
And Harry Festing, mouthful. Okay. We have, if you didn't pick it up in agenda, they're in the back. There's also a handout. We're going to just do a couple quick updates real fast.
Josh, could you tell them there's coffee and food?
There's also coffee and food. Feel free to come right up and get it. We're a friendly group. No, don't hesitate to come up to the front and get something. As Matt comes up to give his, I will skip right to the second one. Brad Winters from IDNR, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, couldn't make it today because of the weather. I'll give the other state update too, sorry. So Illinois Department of Natural Resources is doing a statewide study of impacts of urban flooding. He just wanted to note that at this point they've finished, they believe, their data collection and have moved on to analysis, and they believe that they are on full track to have a report out statewide in May. He expects to come and give a preliminary report on their findings at one of our future meetings. Illinois EPA, not on the agenda, is still sitting on the $5 million funding proposal that we sent to them. If I were a betting man, which I'm not, if I were a betting man, I would say that Director Bonnet at Illinois EPA likely is going to be retained by the governor-elect, which is a good thing because it keeps some of our positive momentum going. But either way, we should know in a couple weeks, once the new administration's in place, what the fate of that funding proposal was. So the only update there is keep waiting. All right, Matt wants to talk a little bit about an RFQ that Delta has out, and that some of you in the room I know are probably interested in replying to, so you might have some questions.
So I'll keep this brief. Before the holidays, Delta Institute released an RFQ. We're seeking well-qualified landscape architecture or engineering firms interested in creating green infrastructure template designs. So we're seeking non-site specific designs that municipal land managers can then take and customize to meet their site-specific stormwater management needs. It's due a week from Friday. It's on our website. Earlier this week, I circulated responses to questions we've received to date, and that's all I've got. So I don't know if anybody has questions. It's being circulated so you can see specifically what we're asking for.
Anybody have questions? Tom or Chris? Tom?
I'm assuming you're not looking for RFQ specific questions, but those you want more kind of addressed specifically to you that you can.
Right. Yeah, and thank you to those of you who have submitted questions. We've provided responses to those, and if anybody wants to see that and hasn't received them, I'm happy to send them along. Also, thanks to Eric, John, others who provided input on the RFQ that we were working on as we were working on it.
Cool. Thanks, man. So yeah, if you have any questions, that's right here. And this design work is consistent with one of the work groups of the collaborative. So it's nice. Speaking of John, you want to say a couple things about the pilot studies, phase 2 pilot studies?
Sure. So we have 5 pilot studies from the MWRD kicking off this month. They're recently approved by the board just a couple of weeks ago. So we have a kickoff meeting January 23rd. And so those, what are the pilot studies, right? Those are 5 areas within the Cook County, 1 in each council of government, that each COG told us that these are important flooding areas. So that's around your neck of the woods. We have the Cal-Sag drainage area, which is basically like Justice, Hickory Hills, Palos Heights, Bridgeview, Bedford Park, and Harlem to 88. That's going kind of east and west there. So that's what we have. So far we've delineated the study area. We're just getting kicked off. We're starting to collect flooding complaints from there. We already have a fair amount of them from our database, things like that. But it's so I mean, Josh requested to say what consultants are doing what. So Arcadis is doing the Cal-Sag drainage area, and then there's another one in the city of Chicago, the 7th, 8th, and 21st wards, and that's by Geosyntec. The other ones are in Harvard Heights, Roberts Road, and Northbrook. Again, those are the areas that the Council of Government said were most important to solve flooding. So that's what's going on. They just kicked them off. We're excited about it.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Yep.
The last time I talked to Dave St. Pierre, John's boss, he suggested that if maybe not the February meeting, but maybe the March meeting, the collaborative, he would have the Geosyntec team and the Arcadis team, who are doing the 2 studies in our Calumet geography, come and present on what their scope of work is and what they hope to do, and so on and so forth. So look out for that. Final quick update, there's a flyer there in the back. The second part of today's meeting, we're going to talk about the HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, National Disaster Resilience Competition that City of Chicago, Cook County, and DuPage County are all applying for. We'll talk more about that later, but one of the things that we're doing at MPC is putting on a series of public roundtables and other events, bringing in national experts on these subjects to come in, do a public event, and then also provide some guidance to the applicants as they apply for this. So our first one is January 27th. This is a flyer for it. There's actually 2 events on this day. One is a downtown sort of lunchtime conversation between David Wagoner, who's an architect out of New Orleans and worked on their post-Katrina resiliency plan, and then Kobe Ruthenberg, who's from MIT and worked on one of the post-Superstorm Sandy plans, specifically for the Meadowlands, where the Giants and the Jets play. So they're going to come for a lunchtime conversation. That'll be at our office. But then David Wagoner, the New Orleans guy, is going to come down that evening to Homewood for a Chicago Southland green drinks at Lassen's Tap. So I know David would prefer to talk to everyone over a beer. If you want to come and hear a little more detail about lessons for the Chicago region, and particularly those parts of us that have some pretty substantial flooding, and just pick his brain about what has happened since Katrina. This should be a fun evening. So that's not on here, but it is on our website. If you're interested, let me know. We would love to see you there, and we hope to have more events pretty much every month throughout the course of the year in support of the National Disaster Resilience Competition application by Cook County, DuPage County, City of Chicago. All right. Okay. With that was all the updates, unless anybody else has any that I just didn't have on the agenda. Any other quick little updates from any of the members?
We're not doing like study group area updates, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay. So with that, Harriet is here from C&T and is going to talk about a little bit of their rain-ready work, and just so that we all know what's going on, and hopefully garner some participation and some support and partnerships. Then we're going to segue into how that relates to stuff that's going on here in Midlothian with a few other speakers. Then we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk more about this National Disaster Resilience Competition and how it relates to Midlothian, to the collaborative, to the greater South Suburbs, so on and so forth. So, Harriet, take it away.
Is there a way I can, or do I need to stand there?
I think you might need to stand.
Okay.
There's no remote.
Imad, are you going to speak to the core ones?
Oh, I wasn't sure I was.
Okay,
That's
I haven't got
fine.
the ones, I've got the ones that I prepared. But
Sure, that's fine.
one of them. Okay, so. Change this so that I can do it. Okay, so let me just go straight on to. So some of you have already seen these slides, so I kind of sought to add some new ones in to, specifically around Midlothian. So I'm going to talk about our, sorry, this isn't, it's not very clear, is it? I'm going to talk about our 2015 goals for Rain Ready. I would like your thoughts, either now or afterwards, on who we should be engaging in Rain Ready, having heard what we're up to. Get your sense of our geographical expansion. Are we seeking to expand in the right areas, the priority areas? Are there opportunities that we should know about? And get a sense of your ability to work with us and interest as we expand the programme. And any other thoughts and observations? So Rain Ready was launched last summer. It was a programme that came out of the City of Chicago Sustainable Backyards programme. The City of Chicago gave rebates to homeowners to help them put green infrastructure in private property as the rebates. So then with the evolution of the Department of Environment, they put out the management of that programme, and we won the contract to run the programme. So that was essentially an information and rebate programme, and then as the rebate money ran out, we kind of took the opportunity to rethink what it was we were seeking to achieve. And one of the things that came out of our discussions with the city was that they felt that that we should take a community approach, not just an individual property approach. So we should look at both the private property owner within the context of the wider community and the public rights of way, and also how you could work with multiple individual homeowners. And the other thing was that they felt that they needed a bigger sense of support. So money alone is not enough. It's not the only barrier to doing this stuff. And it needs a more hand-holding process. So we've designed a program that seeks to do that. And it's got multiple elements. And in 2015, our goals are to expand education and outreach. So we launched the website rainready.org in the summer. And we've had a sort of semi-outreach program, and now we're formalizing that. And we've got some priority communities in the City of Chicago and Cook County, and then we're doing social media outreach to some cities in the US. The second goal is to expand the Rain Ready Home Service. I'll tell you in a minute, or Ryan will tell you in a minute, a bit more about that. But essentially, we've designed a prototype service, and we did that, and we started to test it last year, and now we want to test that service, which is for individual property owners, within the context of the community. Which leads us to the next bit, which is our next goal, and we started it last year. It's a project we're doing in partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, is Rain Ready Community. So it's recognizing that you can't tackle urban flooding individual property by individual property. You need to do it at community scale. So what does that community service look like? Rain Ready Alert is partly a bit of fun, just because it's about technology and things. So one of the things that we recognized was that the early warning systems are very unsophisticated at the moment. So you get a warning that there'll be flash flooding in Cook County, maybe in the city, but you don't really feel yourself at risk. So you don't take the actions you need to take, such as taking pets out of basements, picking up carpets and things. So a lot of the damage is just that kind of stuff. So if we could get a more sophisticated alert, it would really start to change behaviours. And we realised that everybody who has a sump pump or a floor drain essentially you could put sensors in those, and those could act as smart ways of communicating with homeowners. Already those things are on the market for individuals, but what if you could start to link them up? And so then you'd start to get all these sensors embedded within a community that would give you a much more sophisticated understanding. So we want to design and test that prototype alert system. And then the fifth area is advocating for state and federal policies. So I'm going to go through all of those a bit more now. First, a little bit of framing research. We started researching on urban flooding about 3.5 years ago. An intern went out, interviewed 15 people. She was a journalism student from Northwestern. She interviewed 15 people. 4 of them broke down in tears as they were describing their stories, and they're currently on our website. And one thing we really learned from that is the extent to which urban flooding is very much perceived as a private problem. In many cases, the flooding isn't even visible on the road, and it's entering people's basements, and they almost feel as though it's their fault. And it's you know, it's kind of combined with yuckiness of the whole thing, and the desire not to talk about it because the impact on property values. We then did after that we did some research, again, wonderful intern who came in and just started ringing up private insurance companies. And somehow or another, remarkably, he managed to get hold of flood damage payouts. So we got that from several insurance companies over a 5-year period, aggregated by zip code. We added into that FEMA payouts. So we really started to get a picture of actual flood damage within zip codes across Cook County. And nobody's ever managed to do this before. So FEMA has always had an instinct that flooding occurs beyond the floodplain, but they've never really been able to show it. And this was the first time. So what we found, here's the map of Cook County and the damage payouts. The darker shades are the worst, with the highest concentration of damage payouts. The blue dots that you can see, particularly around the north and the south, around here and up there, is floodplain. And so you can see that the zip codes, and we've actually marked up the zip codes, with the highest payout, in many cases have no floodplain in them whatsoever. So we found that there were damage payouts across 97% of Cook County zip codes. It's actually probably higher. Some zip codes just like have one property in them. And that the average payout was $4,000, actually above that. And that it affects an equivalent of 1 in 6 properties. There may be duplication of some of those, i.e. one property doing multiple claims. But we also know that a large proportion of properties will never have filed a claim, even though they flooded. And most significantly was that there was no correlation between payout and the floodplains. What we did find a correlation with was income. So those worst affected, highest damage payouts had a lower median household income. So there you can see those zip codes with the red around them. Yay. Hey. So those zip codes with the red around them are those with the highest damage payouts, and the paler the colour, the lower the median household income for that zip code. And there you can see here, all these dots here are the floodplains. So you can see some of them have a lot of floodplain in them, but here there's none at all. And here's a graph just to show the correlation between income. So each of those dots is a zip code, number of damage payouts, average median household income for that zip code. So as you can see, it's the highest number of damage payouts in the lower income communities. We did a survey of flood victims. These were people who had said that they were affected by property flooding. It was an online survey. We found that 70% had flooded 3 or more times. And we've since done other surveys, and the same results we found the same results. And we found that there were also wider impact. So 84% suffered stress, 13% ill health, and 41% lost the use of part of their property. And it's strange, you know, in some cases, this is just, it's just a little bit of water in someone's basement, and no big deal. In some cases, it's that amount of water in someone's basement, and that's their home. It's a very big deal. So it's this sort of, you know, strange thing. And all of this is written up in a report called The Prevalence and Cost of Urban Flooding. The other thing we found, I forgot to mention, is that there's a sort of apparent randomness of the situation. So I often speak to people, they say, we never flooded at all, and then someone built something over the other side of the road and suddenly we flooded. Or I've interviewed someone who was affected by flooding. Their house looked identical to all the houses down that street, and yet they actually had to leave on a boat once the flooding was so severe. And yet to me it just looked like all the other houses. Thanks to our partnership with Elevate Energy and our testing and design of the Rain Ready Home Service, it's taken us, or particularly Ryan, where are you, Ryan? Hey, Ryan, back there. It's taken Ryan into a lot of properties, and so we've started to really, Ryan has done a lot of work inspecting pipes, etc., very unglamorous. It's taken us to, you know, to see firsthand some of the problems, such as this mold, just rotting, repetitive damage of property causing rotting. In here, sort of situation of, you know, someone who clearly couldn't cope. They had raw sewage coming out of their toilets and bath, and they just left it. Well, this is some poor soul. This was a tenant, and after the April 2013, he just sent in this photo of what used to be his bedroom. One of the things that people said to us was, of course, you would expect flooding in the city of Chicago. It's built on a swamp. And so we were interested in, is it just a city of Chicago problem, or is it more widespread? We did two pieces of research. One was a survey of the major cities across the Great Lakes states, Great Lakes region. We found that 100% of them had a flooding problem. 90% of them characterized that flooding problem as medium to severe. We did also then some analysis of flood warnings. So these flash flood warnings that you receive, you read on the news, etc., they're given out by the National Weather Service, and they're done when flooding is either imminent or in progress. So at the point where they're given, there's going to be flooding, at least the ones that we analysed. And we looked at them again for the same period of time, 2007 to 2011, in the counties of 10 major cities. And so Chicago had 198 flash flood warnings, and these are all photos from these cities. Boston 133, Denver 81, Houston 145, Kansas City 192, LA 136, Memphis 227, New York 222, Philadelphia 199, Seattle 82. So basically there's flooding across all the major cities that we looked at. And we didn't look at them because we knew they had flooding, we just picked them so that they represented a good geographical spread. So in summary, we found that the problem is often private and hidden from public view, and therefore not talked about in the way it needs to be. That the problem is prevalent and repetitive and affects cities across the region. Low-income communities, at least in Cook County, are some of the most vulnerable. And the impacts are chronic: more sewage, mold, foundation cracks, health, stress. We interviewed a woman, again, you know, just terrible, sort of came out in white after the interview. She was just stuck in a situation. She was low income, her husband had just lost her job, she was repetitively affected by flooding, the insurance company had just dropped her, she couldn't afford to repair the home, so she was just dealing with all the mold. She couldn't sell the home, and her son had just been rushed into hospital because he'd had an allergic reaction to the mold. Just the sort of nightmare scenarios. And evidence that Floodlothian Midlothian often talk about, of these foreclosures, businesses relocating, and of course it's going to get much worse as a result of climate change. And so there were people, you know, there's a Facebook group that we now manage called The Gross Gathering, and it's of flood victims, and it's their chance to communicate. And they often just feel that they are paying the cost of managing someone else's stormwater. So they're just on the receiving end of other people's stormwater. This home is Dana's. She's in Glenview and she is stuck because she can't sell her home. Midlothian, photo taken May 2014. And Crestwood, this home belonged to Tim, who has since abandoned it. It was flooded so many times he couldn't cope anymore. So after doing all this research and kind of realizing we have a problem around flooding and it goes way beyond the floodplains, we started to use the terminology urban flooding. It's used more in Europe and Canada than it is in America. And we defined it as the inundation of property in a built environment caused by rainfall overwhelming the capacity of the drainage systems. And we were kind of excited because we put it on Wikipedia. And so here's a diagram of a home, and the point is that water can enter property in multiple ways. It can go up and come out through the floor drains or through bathtubs or toilets, and I've had people describe in their forms how they've just seen a shower of raw sewage coming out of their toilet. It can seep down the side of a property, or it can enter through windows and doors. And sometimes that water has come, in case often of Midlothian, that's come as a result of the creek over banks from the creeks, and in some cases that's just local, too much water within a given area just entering into the windows. I'm going to go on to solutions, but Helen, could you just say a few words about flooding? I know, even in just like a few sentences.
Okay, you mean like yesterday?
Yeah. so Helen and has been the sort of spokesperson for Floodlothian Midlothian, who've been really done some very pioneering work. We nominated them for the US Water Alliance Prize, which is a national prize, and they got the front page as a result of that nomination. And Helen's not only become a spokesman person really for the flooding in Midlothian, but now it's sort of, I think, got others inspired. So as a result, 3 other resident action groups have been set up in other parts of Cook County because they've heard Helen speaking and they thought, well, we actually have a problem too. But just describe a little bit about the flooding.
Okay, just so you know, we're not done until we're discussing this over lunch with the president someday. We're working on the governor next on the way there. We've been flooding for over 20 years. It's pretty serious, specifically on the block I live on, but April of 2013, it's all a blur now, we'd had 15 significant floods as of that time, and that about pushed me over the edge. So I started knocking door to door, found a lot of people dealing with the same thing, and what we have is a real problem with creeks overbanking, and also the sewers are overburdened. They can't carry what's coming from upstream, and just through our own desire to figure out why nobody's been able to stop it for 2 decades, we started to follow the water, learn a lot about the watershed, where it's coming from, how long it takes. Became fascinating, really. So pursuing agencies who could help us on our own, we met CNT, and we were so fortunate to become a part of this program with Rain Ready. So we're just going to keep providing the evidence. Most of us have done everything we can to our house. Building what we can, shoveling out what we could, rain barrels, berms, you name it, we got it. We live with things up high, elevated, nailed to the walls, not on the floor. But our next step is stopping it from happening, which we believe it's an overbuilt, man-made disaster. So that's where we're really looking to focus, is to change how our our agencies and governments move forward, so that with what already exists can feel protected in their own investment, and we can change how we move forward to not exaggerate what's already a complete nightmare.
Thank you. So in designing solutions, we were inspired by this image of healthcare and the fact that healthcare is seen as within a system. So there are, the hospitals, which could be like large-scale storage detention or sewer pipes, but then there's also this broader suite of solutions. And also inspired by the fact that the customer, in this case the patient, in our case the flood victim, is at the centre of it. So understanding and diagnosing the problem and designing solutions with a really in-depth understanding of those problems seems to be critical. And the need for science and technology and communications. We've had various sort of principles, and they're continually being refined around Rain Ready, so thinking about them all the time. That, for example, that the solutions should be affordable and quick to install. So we see them as complements to traditional grey infrastructure, things that you can move quickly on. That they seek to reduce damage. So our calculations, our performance metrics, is not around volumes captured. We're not seeking to capture all the flood water. We're just seeking to minimise the damage. So take account of it, but just take it away from damage caused. We're seeking solutions that are community-based, in which the residents are both advocates and participants, because what you do on your private property affects the broader stormwater runoff. That has no negative impact, downstream impact, so you're seeking solutions that don't just push the water down onto your neighbours, and that adds economic, social and environmental value to the community. An approach that can be easily replicated. So we're designing a rain-ready prototype that could be done anywhere. So we'll have a toolbox of solutions, a toolbox of analytical tools. And we've started to do that with Rain Ready Home, and we're getting some sense of that with Rain Ready Community. And then if you can standardise it, then you can come up with some kind of accreditation. Is there a way that we could accredit the providers of Rain Ready Home services, or could we accredit a Rain Ready Home? Some way of doing it so that you then add market value, which then makes it attractive to the insurance companies, to the banks, realtors. Solutions that leverage private investment in infrastructure with actions on private property, and ones where you're looking at cumulative risk assessment. So that's a notion, really, an EPA type notion. The fact that the communities don't really just have, residents just don't have one risk, they have multiple things. Just in relation to flooding, we find most properties have multiple ways that water is entering their home, and therefore they're affected by this mix of problems, and you need a holistic risk reduction strategy. So we started with Rain Ready Outreach. On our website, rainready.org, there are videos, a photo library, fact sheets, really designed largely for residents, how to set up a resident action group, how to set up funds, or ways of helping. And then we now have an outreach program in the sense that we prioritised, we just looked at the mapping that we did, and we selected those communities that were below median household income and had particularly high flood damage. And so we're prioritising them for our outreach. We put in a funding application to work in 4 cities, the Chicago communities, in partnership with the Historic Chicago Bungalow Association and Green Corps. And if we get that funding, that would be sort of the first tranche of this outreach. But we're starting to do it already. I've got 2 meetings with aldermen this afternoon. And then Rain Ready Home. We started designing it last year, and it works on the premise that there are quick, affordable solutions that you can do in your home that can mitigate flooding, such as a backwater valve, downspout disconnection, regrading French drain, where you're regrading the land so it's not going towards the foundation, it's going away, and then the French drain takes the water away into, for example, a rain garden or bioswale. Or things like barriers and window wells. Ryan's going to talk about Rain Ready Home Service.
Hello, Ryan Wilson. I represent Elevate Energy and Rain Ready Home, a partnership with the Center for Neighborhood Technology. So Harry made a pretty good case for kind of the quantitative and qualitative damages that people are experiencing around urban flooding in the region. Rain Ready Home is really intended to be a service to help people understand on their property what these damages actually look like. One of the challenges for one of the challenges I think for homeowners is just understanding what home ownership actually entails. The age of your building, when it was built, how it was permitted, the building codes at the time, all influence how your building performs over time. Certain materials were used, certain foundation materials were used at different ages and periods, and these affect how your home floods or water seeps into your building. Potentially it even affects if you have, say, I know this community has garages that are sub-elevated, which is a significant entryway for flooding in the community. So Rain Ready Home is modeled off a very successful national energy efficiency retrofit service that many different agencies implement, including Elevate Energy. It is commonly termed a labor market intermediary, which is a complicated way of saying there's a homeowner and there's contractors out there. And if you've ever dealt with contractors, they all have a good story to tell, they're all the best deal, and they all always work. If you've ever dealt with contractors, you know that's not true. Some of the best ones are accurate, and some of the worst ones are totally inaccurate to their claims. And so what we try to do is pair a lot of different trades, plumbers, drain layers, basement waterproofers, roofers, people who just downspout, landscape contractors. We pair them together into a single set of recommendations. And we help you, the homeowner, coordinate those improvements to help to reduce the flood risk at your property. Harriet mentioned some of the common improvements that we do recommend. The process is we come out to your property, you apply to the program, we come out to your property, do a systematic analysis of the building. We look at the basement, we look at the foundation, we look into the building sewer, we look at all the roof and building drainage, the property drainage, your neighbors' drainage, the alleys, the streets, and we come back to you and say, here's what we've observed. Objectively, here are the problems we've seen, here are the damages we've seen, and we think that these improvements applied in X, Y, and Z ways will help reduce your risk. If you want to move forward with those improvements, we help you solicit bids from qualified contractors. These are contractors who have gone through a qualification process that we've set up, protocols that help us ensure that we've seen and inspected previous work the contractors have done. We know that they're licensed, we know that they're bonded, we know that they're not going to be fly-by-night contractors, that some people do experience after big flood events, big disaster events. Another thing that I think came up in the anecdotal and qualitative assessments and research that Harriet and her team were doing in the early stages of this project. Homeowners need support, and we're here to provide that support. So we provide an assessment report that details the risks, makes recommendations to the homeowners, take you through that solicitation of bids and contractor review, help you make a decision which contractors you want to move forward with, what projects you want to move forward with, and help you prioritize those. Some homeowners, for example, Lori, was able to prioritize 2 out of 3 improvements that we recommended. A rain garden, landscape grading and drainage, but was not able to address the seepage issue that was occurring on another side of the house. She had to invest in a furnace that season. And these are the priorities that many homeowners have to make, and it's a complicated calculus. This one, she spent $44,850 and had to spend another $4,000 on furnace to stay warm in the winter. So she'll be making investments in the next round of improvements next season, we think. These homeowners just were having seepage on one side of their building through installation of some grading, some deep-rooted native perennials, downspout disconnection, rain garden installation. They have not flooded in the, I think the 5 rain events over an inch in the last, at their neighborhood, at their property in the last 6 months. They're actually, a number of our property owners have been participating in the Coco Rajas rain gauge reporting network. So we're actually starting to get the actual rain events that are happening over the period of time that are occurring at their houses. So this is allowing us to begin to develop a sense for how impactful different types of quantified improvements are. And what we're seeing over the 2 pilot seasons that we've run, end of 2013, 2014, is that there are a lot of people who are interested in the service. We have 60 approved homes, approved applicants waiting for the service across the city of Chicago. And this next season we'll be working in Midlothian specifically, and the Chicago neighborhood of Chatham and East Side. Our 2015 goals are to do 35 or more assessments in these communities. We will be working also with the Historic Chicago Bungalow Association through an IDNR coastal management grant to do other assessments with neighbors and homeowners in the East Side community. And we hope to be able to convert 35 of those properties into actual retrofit or improved properties. In parallel to this, one of our big challenges as a program, it is a pilot, it's not a, I think we use the term service, is that's what we're hoping to be. But right now, we still have to prove that these improvements that are being made work. We're a service that's modeled on energy efficiency. It is very easy, relatively speaking, to model the energy loss in a building based on insulation, based on windows, based on building materials. It's very difficult to model the risk that your home is exposed to because of urban flooding. And that's something that we need to collectively, and we specifically will be working on over the next year or 2 or 3 years, is to figure out how, what these, when you make an improvement to your home, when you make a retrofit to your home, what is the reduced risk that you achieve?
So Rain Ready Community is based on the same premise that there are quick, low-cost things that you can do in public rights-of-way within the community to alleviate flooding, such as bioswales, porous paving, green alleys, and street retrofits. And so we've been testing, designing a service with the Army Corps of Engineers. Imad, you going to quickly talk through?
Sure. Actually, I think this one is kind of, the one that we saw yesterday was a little updated. My name is Imad Samara. I'm with the U.S. Army Corps. I'm project manager. And actually in April, I'm not sure I want to go through the whole presentation. I just want to kind of talk about the whole thing that we're working on. So in last April, I guess the Corps had us submit a proposal. They went to the entire nation and asked for a non-structural solutions. And at that time, Harriet basically came to our office and suggested the Rain Ready. So we submitted this a proposal, and by July, we got funded for it. So we were funded for what we're gonna be calling is Rain Ready Community. So we designated actually, or after we got the funding, and we were really happy to get the funding. This is kind of like for the Chicago District. Chicago District is part of the entire Corps, but this is our kind of home. That was kind of the first project that we're doing in this format. So we were excited, and we came up by maybe last November. We got an MOA with CNT about how to, the process, the plan, to do it. We're going to do 2 pilot programs under this funding for the village of Midlothian and for the Chatham area in Chicago. So we're going to go in, we have been working with Midlothian actually on other things. The Corps is, we're working on a flood warning plan that we were able to secure funding for that, and we installed a gauge, a USGS gauge, so it kind of alerts when flooding and elevation. So we've been working, but this is going to also allow us to work with other government agencies like IDNR, USGS, and MWRD, and get together and see, okay, you guys all have that information, let's get it all together. Let's really hone on what the problem is and come up with maybe a report that at the end says, this is the problem, this is what the solution could be, and hopefully we'll find somebody to fund those solutions and work on it. We're excited for this, and we already kind of initially started Midlothian, and in the next month or so, we should be maybe meeting with the Chatham area and also starting that process.
Thank you. So I'll skip on and then just talk about. So at the out, what we'll end up with is a Rain Ready Community Plan, which is what we're working on for Midlothian, one that summarises the problem, outlines the opportunities and limitations to community scale action. And then lists, maps, quantified recommended solutions, both for individual properties and for the public rights of way, and then describes how to implement them, how to fund them, install them, and policies and incentives. And so that process has been working with residents to help them organise, documenting the problem, assessing properties, citizens data. So we did training with Midlothian residents. We have, is it 15 or 13? 12 rain gauges now set up with Coco Raha so that they can monitor rain events on their property, mapping problems and opportunities. And we convened with the village to convene this event with the state rep and all the major agencies. See a pack of So the timetable is that we will present our findings back to the village on what the problems are, and then in April, June, we'll come up with recommended solutions, and then a complete plan in September. I want to talk about that. So just onto Midlothian, here's a map, and with the floodplains mapped on it. I think the floodplain is the blue stripy. What's the shaded bit?
Okay, so the stripy part is called floodway, and that's where the floodwaters actually move through. The light, or the blue that's next to that, like the darker bluish blue, that's floodplain 100-year, and the lighter blue is the 500-year floodplain.
Right.
So that's still zone, I think it's like zone AE or something. So it's still floodplain, but it's like less likely to flood.
Okay, and so we've just done a survey of all residents, 4,000 residents in Midlothian, to find out who is flooding. We had around 260 responses, so it was 4,000, so that was around 6% survey response. And we found that 60-something or other % of those people who were flooding were outside the floodplain. And essentially the picture of flooding within the village was that it was right across the village. We're now trying to map out what type of flooding is affecting different bits of the village. I think we're finding that a bit harder. So most people have just checked the wet basement, i.e. we don't really know how the water's getting into the basement. We just know that we're flooding. And 81% of respondents said that they just feel that it's affecting the whole quality of life in the village, even if they are not personally affected with property within their home. That's me. Yeah.
I have a question here. So the Rain Ready Community Plan, when I've heard it described in the past, I think of in typical planning terminology, you've got like a local comprehensive plan, you've got capital improvement plan, you've got specific project engineering plans, and all of these things use the word plan. I know we haven't written a Rain Ready Community Plan yet, so we don't totally know what the final product is, but how, in your mind, is this product different or consistent with, or whatever, any of these sort of established documents that are more standard and understood by particularly municipal governments who do these things all the time?
So, as you said, we haven't yet written it, and so I think we're going to figure that out. One thing, so I would imagine that it's a plan that every single resident who is affected by flooding sees them on it and understands what solution that's recommended, where it is that will help alleviate them. So there will be a very strong correlation between their problem and the fix that's recommended to solve it. So hence a map will be critical. And then, so I think ease of understanding will be the most critical thing. But yeah.
So is a community empowerment tool or something for the community of residents to take to elected leadership or folks in power and say, this is what we would like you to be exploring further?
Yes, and our hope and expectation is that the elected leaders will have been involved in the whole process anyway.
And the data that we are using, we're really gathering them from all these government entities. Like we are working with for instance, Midlothian, we're working with the city, we're working with MWRD, we're working with IDNR. We're gonna try to work with NDOT even, you know. So really, whatever plans that they have, whatever they have done, investigated, you know, did an analysis on, we're gonna take that information and we just gonna put it all together for, you know, for how do we go from here. But absolutely what you said, it's a tool that they can go and say, you know, we have this study and this is what was recommended. Who can fund it?
Yeah, I just, to build on that, sort of, I think everybody probably has a little different vision, maybe what to me it seems like the real opportunity here is that it's like a component of the comprehensive plan, you know, an appendix or something like that, and that the municipality, you know, the staff and elected officials are part of the development of the plan, not kind of the receiver of the plan.
Exactly.
And then I also think about, it seems to me sort of compartmentalizing things, that the Rain Ready Home program is sort of the flood protection piece, how to keep the water away from your building. The flood, or the Rain Ready community is about addressing the source of the problem, keeping the water from the rain from generating runoff in the first place. And then the last piece is just getting it integrated with the capital improvement plan for the community, so that, you know, as I mentioned kind of yesterday as well, is that, you know, it's tied into the street and infrastructure program, so that every time the street is reconstructed, it's done in some sort of permeable way that is absorbing the runoff through, you know, again, permeable paving or bioretention or other sorts of things, so that, you know, every project that's done in the community is at least partially contributing to absorbing runoff. And that's really the strategy that CDOT in their, you know, kind of new sustainable urban infrastructure guidelines was really focused on, is that every right-of-way project is going to help to reduce runoffs. And so that is kind of what you're thinking about, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And, you know,
and actually, I mean, you know, in Midlothian, we had that one meeting with Congressman Davis, I guess. I mean, he's the one that brought everybody and said, hey, what can we do? What can you do? What can you do? And, and he heard also that he can go back to, you know, Springfield and try to do something. So, yes, it is all trying to get to the bottom, try to get some funding to kind of get things done.
And if I may, first, this is so exciting to have you guys all here. You know, this is just, we adore Floodlothian here. You guys can't tell, so it's one of those yes. I noticed you skipped over a slide, so I may be bringing up something that you've already addressed. And it is in that direction of legislation and having Representative Davis here and everything. But it's actually in that micro level of the building codes in the communities. And I'm curious if there's anybody, I didn't hear any agencies or any representatives in that legal realm, you know, inspecting, studying very specifically each municipality's code books to figure out where there may be gaps, not on a state level, which is important, not to minimize, you know, that direction, but in addition to include the local. Has there, am I missing something here, or?
Yeah, so we heard yesterday, am I right in remembering, oh, I don't think you were here, Josh, that so CNT helped get the Urban Flooding Awareness Act introduced, which has required the state to do a study, and one of those elements of the study is to come up with a model stormwater ordinance to help inform the codes.
Okay, but is there going to be any dedication specifically towards the building codes in particular, or more that broad-based as you're suggesting, which is good? I think it's a great direction.
No, I'm sure that'll include
okay.
codes. And it's certainly something that we'll be looking at. So we'll be including policies in our Rain Ready community plans. We'll be including recommendations. And so just another, I suppose, response is I think we'll also be taking strong guidance from residents such as Floodlothian Midlothian about what that plan should look like, because, you know, we need that kind of understanding of your needs.
So this is good work. John's chomping a bit here. So the good news is lots of people are responding to these issues, and there are lots of organizations working here in Midlothian. So John's going to talk a little bit about some work that NWRD is doing. Eric will say a few words. I'm not sure the order of the slides. Eric did some work from Chicago Wilderness looking at other opportunities for green infrastructure. All of that helps set the stage for the tour that we're going to take, but also I think is useful information as we continue to think about this. We keep coming back to it, National Disaster Resilience Competition. So, John, take it away. Thank you, Harry and I.
Yeah. Sure. I don't know why they need a model ordinance. We just passed our new one, so. Very good. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting work that you guys are doing. It's good. I'm glad to see more emphasis on community involvement. So that's of course an important part. So yeah. So more about floodplains and what's happening here in Midlothian. This is the village. They're the extents here. Do I have the? It's starting from the last. Okay, so they're the village extents. Okay, so just so you know what we're looking at here, and this is from our awesome GIS online viewer that's freely available to everyone. gispub.mwd.org. So it shows flooding area. You can report flooding areas on there. There are 3 different ones that you'd be interested in. One is to report flooding complaints. Okay, which I think many of you in this room may be interested in. And then there's another one to see where the regulatory floodplains are. And also, so you can see different layers. We call these layers over here on the left. And it's just, we have GIS, Geographical Information Services, and we have different options over here. So you can kind of plug and play, and I'll go through some of them. But here's the village extents, just so you know what you're looking at. And then I took those away so you can see the floodplain a little easier. So this is a little bit of a review. So we have, should I use the laser pointer? Okay, I don't see it.
It's hidden underneath the clothes.
Yeah, it's inside the clear. That's what I call it, right? So, yeah. All right. So here we go. This is Natalie Creek, which you'll hear about more later, and this there are other waterways coming through here. So when these flood, when they take over their banks. So the stripy area or hash is what we call floodway, and that's where like the majority of the flow is actually moving during a flood. And then after that, it's floodplain. So the first the blue here is 100-year floodplain, which is a 1% chance any year. Okay, just to be clear about that. And so that water it doesn't have very much velocity in it. Okay, it's not moving very quickly. Most of the velocity isn't there. However, it's storage, so it's volume there, but not moving water as fast. So you definitely don't want to be anywhere in the floodway if you can be, you know. So but most of the stuff's built out here. So we have that, and then there's like the 500-year floodplain in red in here with lighter blue on the other map, and that just kind of describes it's 0.2% chance every year. 500-year floodplain. So
John,
this is.
can we ask you, what block is that? North-south block on 147?
So 100.
Your star, where's your star?
That's for
That's
where
for
I just put in Midlothian, Illinois, and that's what it put up there. So I don't know if it's the
What street
center.
is that?
Pulaski.
Pulaski, that's where we're at. Okay. One block south of it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So to help you orient yourself, I can read some of these off. The resolution didn't pronounce it well. This is 144, 143. Some of the public works manager probably didn't ask about this.
We're sitting underneath that red star. Right?
So that's
Yeah.
The red star is just the middle of the town.
This says Midlothian there. Yeah. Hopefully that helps you orient yourself.
John, what's the source of those floodplains?
Okay, yeah. So we'll go through this. We have, if you'd like, you can talk about it. Yeah. Oh, there's a button on top.
My name is Joe Sperry. I'm with the Midlothian Public Works. Been here 30 years. Just took over as superintendent at the end of March this year. So I've been battling this flooding for 30 years. I'm just now getting on the front line with you guys. What happens is the watershed upstream from Oak Forest just inundates our village. Where's the creek here?
Other one, top one. Top
So
one is
that's-
the
Yeah,
other.
that's Natalie. The other one's Midlothian.
Yeah, we actually have 2 creeks in town. Midlothian Creek is right here along the railroad. We have some flooding issues with that, but not as severe. This comes into town at 149th and Kilpatrick, a little bit south of that, but the problem starts when it hits the head wall there at 149th Street. The water, the culvert there, when we take our tour, it's gonna be hard to see with the snow and the ice, but the culvert actually comes in and takes like 2 90-degree turns across the street there. Then it heads across another street and then through a channel. And it's so restricted that when we get inundated with the water from Old Forest, it just breaks over the head wall. It'll start to go back into the other side, but eventually it's just too much. And then it starts to run down the side streets. Let me see where we're at here.
I'm gonna point to it right there. Right about here is where. Sorry. Right about here is where Kilpatrick is at, and that's where we put in the flow meter. And that's where it really busts over and it floods. Everything that you see in blue right now and more is underwater with less than 2 inches of rain. Every 2-inch rain or less. We had 1.5 inches when we had blocks underwater.
What happens is, at first, it could be debris in front of the culverts, obviously, then the water will start going over the streets. Even when we clear that off, that's what we're out there doing, just constantly making sure it's got a clear path to make its way all the way to Pulaski. But eventually, there's just too much water to the volume. So it starts to break out, and it runs down 149th Street, which I'll show you when we go on this little tour. And then it starts to run through the neighborhood, through some yards. I'm not specifically sure which yards, but mostly it's through the streets. It goes down into the sewers.
It'll be almost everything from here down about almost a block, almost 2 blocks down. It runs streetwide, but from this point over at least 4 blocks, it runs through the middle of all those blocks, and I took video footage of that during the last.
And then it enters into in between the properties on Kildare Avenue. Goes in there. That's with Helen and a lot of her friends and people on her group. They get inundated because in between all the houses, there's a low-lying area there, and the water just, that's like a natural place for it to go, and the ponds up and then gets into their properties. Over the years, we had a lot of bad issues with the 3 streets just west of Pulaski where it dumps off, because there was, I think, 3 36 or 48-inch culverts that restricted the water also. The water would go over the street there, go down the street. We've since put in 3 bridges, and we've mitigated a lot of that flooding. But now we're down to our last flooding on the Natalie Creek, and this is what we're working on right now. So it all has to come down to Pulaski. It all goes down into, I believe, an 8 and a 4-inch, or 8 foot and a 4 foot culvert. Then it runs to the Calsag Channel and north, straight down Pulaski Avenue.
Thanks, Joe.
Cool.
Can I ask a question while everybody's here? So pertaining to the areas that Joe was just talking about, where Natalie Creek travels, I'm just curious, where do we? I talked to an engineer about how do we find out the old maps, 100 years ago. This creek was rerouted, and in particular, my block, it's sinking. We're sinking. We're a giant bowl that's just falling in the ground. There's a lot of underground water movement. I really want to look at the old maps. Why is there so much underground water movement?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. So, yeah, so I'm an engineer, so you pointed, that's my answer. Well, no, you pointed to a big issue that's all across Cook County, that people enclose these streams, and the pipe that they put it in wasn't big enough for the stream, and even if it was, the land around it is still depressed. So when it can't get into that pipe, it's going to go to the lowest point in the topography in the land, and it's going to pool up there. And if people are living there because they think it's all soft, it's underground, it's not. There's still going to be some issues there. So you're wondering how to get to the
I'm
old
wondering,
maps?
because it's not just sinking. Quick example.
Yeah.
My 3-car garage was sliced in half and heaved. I hope you do stop by our headquarters on your tour. We have tons of data and photos and everything we'd love to show you. However, when the garage floor was taken out, there's like a foot of hollow, nothing underneath it. It's taking, and my house is sinking, and stuff like that.
The water is used to going there. That's the natural way that the water would go. So it'll wash it away. Yeah, and all that. So what happens? They put a creek in a pipe. The pipe's not big enough. okay? And also even the underground, so the soil layers follow the topography. So if you have a clay layer, which most of us do underneath here, it'll get to the clay layer. It's harder to infiltrate through the clay layer, so it'll follow the topography of the clay layer. It's almost like an underground, like you say, like if it falls on a tarp, right? And this is the lowest point of the tarp, it's gonna just go to the lowest part of the tarp, and then it'll go to like down, like say the whole tarp is slanted, like a creek bed, it's gonna go down there, and it's gonna take soil particles with it. So what happened? This was a natural waterway. They put it in a small pipe because that's how bigger they thought the creek was.
But if the natural waterway is 8 blocks away from where I'm talking about, we're talking it's just still traveling its own natural pattern, creating its own waterway, so it's
yeah. So you have
everything.
Tributaries, right? You have small streams that lead into these bigger ones.
Because I'm not on a floodplain, so what I'm talking about is off a floodplain. So I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, tributaries. So it's
are there pre-development hydrologic maps?
Yeah. Okay.
And where are they?
I can get you those. I don't remember the website off the top of my address,
Okay.
even if I did, but please email me. Like I've referred other people to those. So if you look at like an earlier map of Chicago, you can see where all the creeks were, and those are risky areas to live. But I mean, a lot of it is caused by just the way that those developed. You know, they're developed poorly.
It's obviously a big issue, so almost 50% of the respondents to the survey said that they had foundation cracks and damage. Is obviously a big issue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's like historical GIS, aerial photographs of that, so you can kind of step through time. It's pretty neat. So earlier we had the question, where did these floodplains come from? Okay, so these are done by first hydrologic analysis, overland flow. So how does a raindrop get from your roof or the street, or even if it's raining really hard, maybe even your lawn, how does it run off, and how does it get, so it gets into like the local sewer system and a catch basin where it travels down the street. Hopefully, you know, it gets into the catch basin and it gets down through the sewer pipes into the street, sewer, into a bigger sewer, then it lets out into the creek. That's the way most of our development has gone. So that's all the modeling that would be under hydraulic modeling, and then or hydrologic modeling, sorry, and then hydraulic modeling is how does the root move through the rivers. And so that's so there are various ways to model this. This is something that's been studied for at least 70 or 80 years. So within time we develop different ways to model it, and there's debate over what's better and what's not, but most are valid in their own ways. So these ones that are displayed right now, those are from one way to model it, which the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has deemed these are historical models. MWRD used a little bit different way to model, and it came with a different floodplain. You can see the difference when I click back and forth. So it's just an illustration of how different modeling techniques have a little bit different results. So, and
I think it's worth noting the difference in the government entity using the models also then has differences in policies, investment policies, capital improvement plan, where these are more than just images that show up on a map. They actually guide then what government entities decide to do.
Right. And you can see that some of them are very similar. Like down here is almost the same. You know, others are different. So, you know, and so there's just different ways to do it. I could go into technical details, I would love to, but most of you would probably, maybe not like that as much. You don't have so much time, so you know, I'd be happy to answer questions afterwards if you'd like. So here's you can get these official maps printed out and stuff. They're different panels. They're listed on the other one.
John, I didn't understand what those were.
Yeah, what were those?
Yeah, I probably should. That was mostly just a reference slide, but so these are just. But since I put it on there, now I should explain it, right? So this is a one panel that you would request this panel from like IllinoisFloods.org, who are the owners of the FEMA mapping floodplains, and they could give you like a hard copy map of it with detailed and better resolution than this, stuff like that. But this is free and it's immediately available, you know, so you can zoom into there. But
John, what about the purple?
What are those points?
The purples are LOMAs. Those are letter of map amendments. So if you can prove that the base floor elevation of your dwelling place is above the base flood elevation. So the lowest part of your dwelling place is above the base flood elevation by at least, I think it's like a foot or two. In our ordinance, we'd like to see 2 because it's safer. Then you can submit for a letter of map amendment, and you can say, well, I shouldn't be required to buy flood insurance on my property here because I'm over 2 feet what the 100-year flood level would be.
So based on the FEMA flood maps, FEMA issued out flood maps and they determined where the floodplains were based on their computer models without on-the-ground data, and put a lot of people into floodplains. If you want to get out of the mandatory flood insurance that's required by your holder of your mortgage, whatever financial institution that is, you have to go through a process of having your property surveyed, getting a letter of map amendment, and getting it approved in order to not have to carry that flood insurance, which is additional to your homeowner's insurance, and only covers whether or not your house is washed off of its foundation in terms of collecting it.
It's not basement backups
Yeah.
as much, yeah. And they recently upped the cost for flood insurance. So, if you want to go through that, you have to hire a surveyor or an engineer, and they'll survey your property and look at the different elevations. And so, it's something you might want to look into, or you might want to keep your flood insurance, depending on how risky you think it is, I guess. Rip?
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation that's going on. I've got one question for the folks in the village. A lot of the solutions a lot of the issues that we're hearing, what it sounds like to me is that there's underground water moving, there's decisions that have been made about culverts that aren't necessarily accurate. There's a lot of fundamental issues. For those fundamental issues, some of the solutions that this working group has talked about has been using land banks and other sources of funds to do property buyouts. Is that something that interests this community? Is that something that
We've tried to apply for acquisition and disaster money and a number of things to which we were all denied. Even though we far exceed the standards that they base those decisions on, we're denied for pretty much everything.
Who did you apply to?
Well, in 2013, we applied for the disaster, federal disaster money, and I reappealed it 3 times and we were told no. And it's based on how the water enters the house.
I guess also, just as a matter of preference, are people willing to leave their homes if it means going to a place, another home that is more protected, safer?
Yeah, but see, we live in houses we can't sell.
Yeah, right.
So if you're not on a floodplain, which I am not, you have to reveal that, and when I tell you there's been over 20 floods here, you don't want the house. So there's no way out. And most of us have damages that have exceeded the value of the home, and you can't give it away. So
I'm mostly thinking about a more perfect scenario where that didn't occur, but if you were given the option to move, would you want to do that? So
yeah, we've said that. We've said that on all of the applications we've filled out.
So I think what we should do is set up a meeting between Floodlothian, Midlothian, and Cook County Land Bank Authority, which has nothing to do with FEMA regulations, nothing to do with floodplains, nothing to do with any of that stuff. They have the absolute ability to come in, offer you a fair deal, and help you move. So I think we should set up a meeting.
Yeah, so we're doing that. We'll be mapping. We asked that within our survey. And
okay.
We'll be doing part of that.
The Land Bank Authority is just much more flexible to do this stuff. It doesn't have to worry about federal flooding regulations and stuff.
And Josh, and actually, we've met, Eric, we've been down there. Where are you at, Eric? Did he leave? We've been down there. We've met with Dominic Tosi and his group. Pardon me? Dominic. Hi, Dominic. We met with you, right? Yes. So this is not news to you, is it?
Well, I'm not sure what specifically you're referring to now.
But we've talked about acquisition at some point. That was one of, I believe, when we started meeting probably about a year ago, that was one of our conversations. Pardon me?
That was with Courtney Hope.
Courtney, maybe that was the meeting with Courtney, excuse me. It might have been the meeting with Courtney Hope.
There is a slight distinction, so Dom's with Cook County, there is a slight distinction between Cook County and then the Cook County Land Bank Authority.
Right.
So if we haven't met with Brian White and Commissioner Gaynor's office who run the Cook County Land Bank Authority, I think that probably is a separate meeting, and they have the ability probably to move even faster on some of the stuff.
Okay, because what we understood the end result of that meeting they were just speaking of to be is that they were not going to help us, that they were leaving it to MWRD, which is why we had already been pursuing their new funding for buyouts as they were developing their rules and regulations, their protocol, what they were going to accept and look at, making their standards slightly different and more workable for people like us.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't gotten anywhere with that yet.
And so once we've done our mapping of the problems within Midlothian, including MWRD's mapping analysis, the survey analysis, the Army Corps' analysis, then what we'll do is map the solutions and bring together all the stakeholders who might have a part to play in those solutions. And so we have the list of residents who said yes, they are interested in being brought out, and then we can map those on. And
Okay.
Cool. All right. So, so one of the flooding waterways in Midlothian is Natalie Creek. This one was reported to us during our phase 2 call for flooding areas within Cook County. I don't. It may have been Joe, even that I talked to on the phone. We described several different areas, and this one was one of them chosen. It was also studied before. We've known it's been flooding here for a while, right? So that's so right now we're comparing alternatives. We've dedicated some of our funding towards this issue. So we're comparing alternatives. We will develop others, even additional issues, additional alternatives. It was studied before in the detailed watershed plan, which just mostly stuck to the waterways. Now we're looking at a little bit more issues like local flooding, urban flooding, as CNT calls it, where just the water just can't even get to the creek. So it's not a creek overflowing its bank, it's the water not getting to the creek. So we're going to look at things like that, as well as the creek flooding too, which we know is a big issue here. So I'm not the project engineer for this, but I've been briefed, and so I'll give you everything that I know. So the evaluation will be based on cost effectiveness and overall flood mitigation impact. So there's some, these are some alternatives. Those of you from the area, this will mean something to you. So from the detailed watershed plan, some ones that are already identified were the a new detention basin at the LeClaire Avenue and 153rd Street with a pump station and control structure that empty out the basin. That's a pretty big one. So that could have considerable improvements. And you'll see this on a map in the next slide. I just can't put them both on the same slide. But yeah, you're welcome to show interest in this. Culvert improvements at several different places, so that way the water can get through the creek. Diversion conduits. I think some of these have been done, right? You guys did these in bridges. You replaced culverts with bridges.
3 streets west of the fall.
Okay.
Have all been replaced.
Okay. Good. So I mean, we'd like to see the village. You guys are doing what you can to solve the problem too. So that's we're working together for that. New diversion conduit. This one would be like. It's a strategy that you just take the water that can't get into the local sewer and put it straight to the ditch. So that's like a diversion conduit. Yeah, that's what it's called, a concrete line channel and a flood wall. So these ones you'll see. This is coming out of the detailed watershed plan. The cost of all of these was estimated at $62 million. Yeah, so here's that big detention pond I was talking about, along with the pump stations to empty it out. Here's some of the, it was like a levee, flood walls, what they call it, upstream of LeClaire Avenue. Here's the diversion channel. This is a channel improvement. I think that might be erosion control, or maybe like a levee, a flood wall type of thing there. So yeah, we evaluated this.
Were buyouts looked at as part of that?
No. We've only recently been looking at buyouts, and it's difficult for our legal team, I guess. Yeah, but voluntary buyouts would be better, and so that's in development. I'm not even sure that we have the authority to do buyouts yet, and that's probably what's taking some time. But that's something we're working on. We recently got authority to do local flooding issues, urban flooding. So that was a good milestone, and so we petitioned the state government to do that. Some additional alternatives that we're looking at is this Oak Creek Plaza detention basin to modify it so that it's more effective, and because it's actually upstream of the affected area, and that way we could just make it so that not as much water gets to the flooding area, so take it out ahead of time. So that's an innovative solution, as well as some others, and there's a consultant working on that now. So these are some of the improvements that would be based on modeling, and you can see the former, this 100-year floodplain, inundation floodplain, and then before the project, and then after the project is just the yellow. So it's a significant improvement. And again, this is based on modeling. We don't know this exactly, but that's our best guess of what the improvement would be if we were to go forward with $61 million of improvements. So that's going on. So currently we're doing the preliminary engineering. We'll get it up to 30% design, which is something that we can apply for permits and things like that. And we have a decent cost estimate with. So right now it's just conceptual. Identify and evaluate alternatives, starting with the DWP alternatives that you saw there, and evaluate them for effectiveness, and find the preferred solution, and take it all the way to 30% design. So after that, the MWRD will decide on how to move forward from there. So,
John,
so we have, yes.
Are you doing that internally, or have you contracted that out?
We're contracted out. Yeah.
Does that process of determining the preferred solution typically involve the community engagement process?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was some question of yes, that we're fairly soon doing some public.
Oh yeah. I mean, so even this afternoon, there's a meeting going on. So I mean, so many of the people in this room will be in that meeting. So I think I know that it's something that the district is moving more towards, which I'm more public involvement. And of course, we want to know where it floods and how bad it floods, how often, things like that.
Actually, with our project, Burns and McDonald has been here, and they have met with us, and they said they would
Good.
meet with us again.
Great.
Like next June, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we've been involved.
Good to hear. Great to hear. Yeah.
What's the rough
going
time?
on? I don't really know.
Okay.
I could ask the project engineer and get back to you if you'd like. So I know it's going on now. They're taking input. So 30% design. I mean, at maximum a year is what I would say. Sometime before a year. That's all I have for now.
Are there any alternatives to a concrete line channel from Keystone
Oh,
to
yeah,
Pulaski in terms of greenway solutions?
Yeah.
And other things that could be put in there versus something that's going to be an unsightly thing to look at versus something that could actually be developed with bike paths or walkways?
Well,
and
this
other
is
things?
the diversion channel we're talking about, Mary, is underground.
Okay.
It's all underground.
Okay.
The water will be retained underground, and then it'll come back up and join in downstream. So you won't even see it.
Okay, because I know that one intersection at that Kilpatrick is sort of a big concrete line thing that is not attractive.
No, this
to
isn't
pedestrians.
anything you see from up above. It'll come in there, go down, hold the water underground, and then come back up downstream.
Have we had anyone do any studies yet about underground springs? Because that's been something that's been bantered about over the past month, and us trying to reach back into history kind of thing, not necessarily in the now.
Not that I know of.
Any thoughts in that direction of possibly exploring it to see if there is perhaps?
It's more on the engineer's side.
Then I look to you, John. Is there anything, that has been on your plate in looking into underground springs? Because again, dating it back 100 years.
Right.
When our community started, water did have to come from somewhere kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's where we've, been, because I'm influenced by actually the Midlothian Creek, whereas she specializes in the Natalie, and I'm not a specialist at all. But I read, and I've been noticing that the underground spring conversation has been put into play, and, I'm curious what it might take to get that also possibly considered in the exploration of the solutions.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll bring it up to the project engineer.
Cool.
So, I want to make sure that Eric has a chance to talk about some of the work that's gone on in Midlothian Creek. Well, I'll be a little audible here a little bit at the end of the meeting. Because there is this other set of planning that's been going on. I think what's interesting here is the amount of work, both on grade, green infrastructure planning, on public and private property that's been going on in Midlothian, even in the absence of a total comprehensive stormwater management plan for Midlothian. So, Eric will talk a little bit about the Chicago Ordinance and SSMA process, and then we'll move on.
So,
I am actually stepping in for Nancy Williamson, who very diligently sent me a script, which I'll try to follow. Because if anybody knows Nancy, I'll get in trouble if I don't follow it. So we did do a couple of years ago, in 2013, we concluded about a year-long process that was funded by Boeing through the Sustainable Watershed Action Team that Chicago Wilderness kind of developed to look at what are the kind of rain-ready techniques at a community scale. In this instance, our firm had been working on a project in Blue Island, downstream adjacent to Midlothian, and noticed, hey, there's a floodplain issue here. Then we were also at the same time doing a project in Robbins, Illinois, which is upstream, and we said, hey, there's a floodplain issue here. Then a developer came to us and wanted to do senior housing near Midlothian Creek in the TOD area here, and they couldn't do senior housing because there was a floodplain issue there. So we came to it really from the private sector initially, and at the same time we were doing a bunch of work with Chicago Wilderness on a volunteer basis through their Green Infrastructure Task Force. And they wanted to do an urban project in the Calumet region. We said, hey, what about Midlothian Creek? There's an opportunity here. So we ended up developing this map. It was a great team. South River Mayor's managers, Dennis Lado is here, and Reggie are here. They were both very, very instrumental in helping Karen Christ. That's sort of where we got initiated into Midlothian and Karen's amazing energy. And then we sort of brought in communities, and it was a really interesting process that culminated in a pretty thick document that has a lot of information that I think would be useful for you, Harriet, going forward in terms of how to be rain ready. It's got references and all kinds of information, but it also has the projects that were priorities based on what the communities were interested in. It included Oak Forest, Robbins, Blue Island, Midlothian, and Posey. 5 communities were the primary sort of communities that we looked at. And we had great participation. We had a lot of community outreach, a number of meetings. Cook County was very, very involved in the process throughout, as was MWRD. MWRD was just phenomenal. They came to every meeting I think that we had. So this kind of is what resulted, and it wasn't just flooding, I should say. It was what we call the opportunity area. So green infrastructure has multiple definitions. For our purposes here, we knew that this is a heavily urbanized area. We needed to think outside of the box. We couldn't just say, hey, let's conserve an area or let's restore an area upstream of some watershed, kind of like New York has done in purchasing big chunks of land to preserve the watershed in the Hudson River. We can't do that here. So we had to be very, very dynamic. And I think that that's sort of one of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm sitting listening to everybody. This is a really dynamic process. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's very complicated, and there are lots of entities involved. There's nonprofits, there's federal agencies, there's state agencies, there's municipalities, and it's really to solve this, I don't think it's going to be one, there's no silver bullet to solve these kinds of problems. So this is among the solutions, I hope, and we focused not just on flooding, as I say, but we focused on connectivity. We really had a broad, very large tent. We wanted every kind of opportunity in the region to be captured. Robbins, for instance, if you know the village of Robbins, they don't have a whole lot of capacity. It's a community that struggles historically, but they got engaged through their history museum. And then once they became engaged, they said, well, green infrastructure, that seems interesting. That could be, we could turn the Tuskegee Airmen started in Robbins at a small airport, and they wanted to turn that into a park, a memorial park. So they kind of had the area, they've got a little plaque there, they wanted to do more with it, and they said, well, if they can help with flooding, that's fine. We don't really care. We just want to preserve it and have access to it. So, but I think that the important thing here is, so this is just sort of another slide that leads into, the important thing is that this really fed into other elements, particularly in Midlothian and some of the other communities. Blue Island just got over $1 million for green infrastructure projects, and they certainly were part of this whole process. They were integral throughout. Midlothian at the same time, got a brownfields grant, and we're doing work with them on that. But green infrastructure ties into brownfields. If anybody's here has been involved with a brownfields assessment grant application, you get points on the application for how you're going to integrate green infrastructure into your reuse of sites. So
South River Mayor managers and Karen and the village here and Joe are beneficiary of a number of grants that came out of looking at brownfields, which doesn't seem like it aligns necessarily, but now we're looking very closely at, okay, if we're going to redevelop, we can't redevelop the way that we did. It can't be all impervious surface. It has to be a really, really well thought out, and now mandatory because of John's lovely ordinance approach to how you redevelop properties. So, and this is just to highlight, hey, the brownfields thing, it really factors into how we approach it when we do brownfields grants. And then, I think that, as I mentioned with Blue Island, Midlothian also at the same time, just as we were finishing up, we said, let's apply for a green infrastructure grant. And there's a piece of property right over here that they purchased and demoed the building, but it had no plans for. And it's adjacent to Midlothian Creek. We said, well, why don't we see if we can get a green infrastructure grant for that through the state, through IEPA. We were successful in doing that, so we're going to provide permeable parking lot and then a rain garden that now the VFW is interested in partnering with the community and giving even more money to expand that into a Veterans Park, or I forget what they want to call it.
Right, Veterans Park, and making it more, more of a community entity, another park.
Yeah, so, and it's, you know, the benefit for the community is that it's going to turn really what effectively is blight. It's a vacant lot that serves no purpose into something that's attractive. It's on a major corridor. It'll buffer some of the streets. One thing that we noticed when we were doing this project is we'd come here at 3:30 or whenever in the afternoon, and there'd be kids walking down the sidewalk.